The rain pounded the roof of the old bus station, each drop a hammer against Eli's heart. He was 17, clutching a worn duffel bag, his eyes fixed on the cracked pavement as his parents' car vanished into the storm. They hadn't looked back not once after telling him he was no longer welcome because of who he loved. Eli's twin brother, Noah, had stood silently in the driveway, his face pale, his hands stuffed in his pockets. They were identical in every way, same hazel eyes, same lopsided grin, yet Noah was the one their parents kept, the one they called normal. The betrayal cut deeper than the rain soaking Eli's clothes. But he didn't cry. Not yet. He boarded the bus to nowhere, the weight of rejection heavier than the bag slung over his shoulder. In the small town of Willow Creek, Pennsylvania, the Harper family was known for their picture-perfect life. David and Margaret Harper, devout and respected, ran the local bakery, their smiles as warm as the bread they sold. Noah, their golden boy, was the star of the high school soccer team, destined for college and a bright future. Eli, though, had always been the quieter one, the dreamer who sketched in notebooks and lingered too long at the library, reading stories of people who dared to be themselves. When he came out at 16, whispering his truth to his parents over dinner, the warmth in their eyes turned to ice. "You're confused," Margaret had said, her voice sharp as a blade. "This isn't God's plan for you." David's silence was worse. He stared at his plate, knuckles white around his fork, as if Eli's words had broken something irreparable. They sent him to a conversion camp 3 states away, a place promising to fix him. Noah, torn between loyalty to his brother and fear of his parents' wrath, said nothing. The camp was a nightmare: cold rooms, endless prayers, and counselors who spoke of sin like it was a disease Eli could cure. He endured it for 6 months, his spirit battered but unbroken, until he ran away, vowing never to return. Now, at the bus station, Eli was alone, with $47 in his pocket and a heart full of questions. Where would he go? Who would he become without his family? The bus roared to life, and he pressed his forehead against the window, watching Willow Creek fade into the distance. He didn't know then that this was only the beginning, that years later, his parents would come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, but that was a story yet to unfold. Eli ended up in Philadelphia, a city big enough to swallow his pain. He found a shelter for runaway teens, a cramped building with flickering lights and kind-eyed volunteers. There, he met Jamie, a wiry 18-year-old with a quick laugh and a scar above his left eyebrow. Jamie had been kicked out of his own home in Ohio for being trans, and his stories of survival were laced with a defiance Eli envied. "You don't need them," Jamie said one night, tossing a pebble into the Schuylkill River as they sat on its banks. "Family's what you make, not what you're born into." Eli nodded, but the words felt hollow. He missed Noah, the late-night talks, the shared jokes, the way they'd finish each other's sentences. He missed the smell of his mom's cinnamon rolls, his dad's quiet pride when he fixed something broken. But love, he learned, could be a double-edged sword, cutting deepest when it was conditional. He got a job at a diner, washing dishes until his hands cracked, saving every penny for a future he couldn't yet see. At night, he sketched faces, cities, dreams of a life where he wasn't an outcast. Jamie became his anchor, teaching him how to navigate the city, how to laugh again. They'd spend hours at a hole-in-the-wall coffee shop, sharing stories over burnt espresso. Jamie's confidence, his unapologetic existence, lit something in Eli, a spark of hope that maybe he could build a life worth living. Back in Willow Creek, Noah carried the weight of his brother's absence. He saw Eli in every mirror, every reflection a reminder of the twin he'd failed. His parents acted as if Eli had never existed. Their smiles tighter, their prayers louder. Noah excelled at soccer, got into Penn State, but the achievements felt empty. He wrote letters to Eli, never sent, piling them in a shoebox under his bed. "I'm sorry," they all began, but the words never felt enough. Margaret and David, meanwhile, clung to their faith, convinced they'd done right by sending Eli away. But late at night, Margaret would stare at old photos, her fingers tracing Eli's face, wondering if they'd made a mistake. David's silence grew heavier, his temper shorter. The bakery, once a place of warmth, felt like a stage for a performance no one believed in anymore. Eli, now 19, enrolled in community college, studying art. His sketches turned into paintings, vibrant canvases that caught the eye of a local gallery owner. His first show was small, but the praise felt like a lifeline. Jamie was there, cheering louder than anyone, his pride in Eli palpable. They'd grown close, their friendship teetering on something more. But Eli hesitated. Love had burned him before family, faith, home. Could he trust it again? One night, after a long shift at the diner, Eli found a letter slipped under his door. The handwriting was Noah's, unmistakable even after years. His heart raced as he tore it open, but the words inside were a gut punch. "Mom and Dad are sick. They're asking for you. I know you owe them nothing. But please, Eli, come home." Eli stared at the letter, Noah's words blurring as his hands shook. Come home. The phrase felt like a foreign language, sharp and unfamiliar. Philadelphia had become his sanctuary, a place where he could breathe without judgment. And now his past was clawing him back to Willow Creek. He hadn't spoken to his parents in 3 years. The memory of their rejection, Margaret's cold eyes, David's turned back still stung like a fresh wound. Noah's letter mentioned their illness, but it didn't say what kind or how bad. Eli didn't know if he cared, or if he should. He folded the letter and shoved it into his pocket, the weight of it heavier than the city around him. Jamie found him later, sitting on the fire escape of their shared apartment, staring at the skyline. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Jamie said, settling beside him with a cigarette he never lit. Eli handed him the letter, and Jamie read it in silence, his jaw tightening. "They don't deserve you," Jamie said finally, his voice low but fierce. "Not after what they did." "I know," Eli whispered, but his heart wasn't so sure. Noah's handwriting had stirred something memories of their childhood, of racing bikes down Willow Creek's dusty roads, of whispering secrets under the stars. Noah hadn't abandoned him. Not entirely. But could Eli face the parents who had? He didn't reply to the letter. Instead, he threw himself into his art, painting with a fury he didn't know he had. His latest piece, a canvas of fractured faces under a stormy sky, sold for $500, a small fortune to him. The gallery owner, a kind woman named Clara, saw the pain in his work and offered him a solo exhibition. "Your story's in these colors," she said. "People need to see it." Eli wanted to feel proud, but Noah's letter haunted him. He dreamed of Willow Creek, his mother's voice, his father's hands, Noah's laugh. He woke sweating, torn between anger and a longing he hated himself for feeling. Jamie noticed the change, the way Eli's smiles grew rare, his sketches darker. One night, over cheap pizza, Jamie pushed. "You're gonna go?" aren't you? Eli chewed slowly, avoiding Jamie's eyes. I don't know. Noah's my brother. He's the only one who ever tried. Tried doesn't mean enough, Jamie said, but his tone softened. If you go, I'm coming with you. No way you're facing those people alone. Eli's chest tightened. Jamie's loyalty was a lifeline, but the idea of bringing him to Willow Creek, a town where different was a sin, terrified him. Still, the thought of Jamie's hand in his gave him courage. Okay, he said. If I go, you're with me. Back in Willow Creek, Noah was drowning in guilt. He'd sent the letter on impulse, driven by his parents' crumbling health and their late-night confessions. Margaret had cancer, stage 3, and David's heart was failing. They'd started talking about Eli, their voices heavy with regret. We were wrong, Margaret had whispered once, tears in her eyes. David had nodded, unable to speak. Noah didn't know if their remorse was real or just fear of mortality. He'd spent years resenting their choice, hating himself for staying silent when they sent Eli away. Now, as he watched them weaken, he felt a desperate need to fix what they'd broken. He didn't expect Eli to forgive him, but he had to try. The Harper house felt like a museum of their past. Eli's old sketches still hung in the attic, hidden behind boxes. Noah found them one night, tracing the lines of his brother's talent, and wept. He wrote another letter, then another, each one pleading for Eli to come back, to at least hear them out. He didn't know if Eli was reading them, but he mailed them anyway, to an address he'd gotten from a friend of a friend. In Philadelphia, Eli and Jamie planned the trip. It was a 6-hour drive, and Eli's stomach knotted with every mile they discussed. Jamie, ever practical, packed snacks and made a playlist of upbeat songs to keep Eli's mind off the dread. We're not staying long, Jamie said. We hear them out. You say what you need to, and we're gone. Eli nodded, but his heart raced. What did he want to say? That their rejection had shattered him. That he'd built a life despite them. That he still, somehow, loved them. He didn't know if he could face their apologies or worse, their lack of one. The day before they left, Eli finished a new painting, 2 boys, backs turned, standing at a crossroads under a fractured sky. One path led to a warm, glowing house, the other to a city alive with color. He didn't know which path he'd choose, but the act of painting it steadied him. They rented a beat-up car and hit the road at dawn. Jamie drove, his hand resting on Eli's knee when the silence grew too heavy. The Pennsylvania countryside rolled by, green and endless, until the familiar sign for Willow Creek appeared. Eli's breath caught. He was 20 now, no longer the scared kid at the bus station. But the town still felt like a trap. They pulled into the Harper driveway at dusk. The house looked smaller, the paint peeling, the garden overgrown. Noah stepped onto the porch, his face a mirror of Eli Salda, but unmistakably his twin. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the years apart vanished. Eli, Noah said, his voice breaking. You came. The air in Willow Creek was thick with the scent of rain and regret. Eli stepped out of the car, his boots crunching on the gravel. Jamie close behind. Noah rushed forward, arms open, but stopped short, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Eli's heart pounded, wanted to hug his twin, to erase the years of silence. But the weight of their last goodbye held him back. I didn't think you'd come, Noah said, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked thinner, his eyes shadowed, as if guilt had carved itself into his face. Jamie placed a hand on Eli's shoulder, a silent reminder of his promise to stay close. "We're here," Eli said, his tone guarded. "But I don't know why yet." Noah nodded, glancing at the house. "They're inside. They want to see you." The front door creaked open, and Margaret appeared, her frame frail, her hair grayer than Eli remembered. She clutched a shawl around her shoulders, her eyes locking onto Eli's with a mix of hope and fear. David followed, moving slowly, his once strong shoulders hunched. The sight of them stirred something in Eli anger. Yes, but also a pang of pity he hadn't expected. "Eli," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for coming." He didn't respond, his jaw tight. Jamie's presence grounded him, a tether to the life he'd built. They stepped inside, the familiar smell of the house lavender and old wood hitting Eli like a wave. The living room was unchanged, same floral couch, same family photos on the mantel, though Eli noticed his face was missing from the newer ones. They sat, an awkward circle of strangers who used to be family. David cleared his throat, his hands fidgeting. "We made a mistake," he said, his voice rough. We thought we were doing what was right." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "We were wrong, Eli. We see that now. We're so sorry." The words hung in the air, heavy but incomplete. Eli's chest tightened, his mind racing with memories of the camp, the bus station, the nights he'd cried himself to sleep. "You sent me away," he said, his voice low but steady. "You chose Noah over me. Why now?" "Because you're sick." Noah flinched, his gaze dropping to the floor. Margaret's sob broke the silence. "It's not just that," she said. "We've been wrong for years. Losing you, it broke us, too." Eli wanted to believe her, but trust was a fragile thing, shattered long ago. Jamie squeezed his hand under the table. A silent "You've got this." "What do you want from me?" Eli asked. "Forgiveness. Absolution. I don't even know who you are anymore." David leaned forward, his eyes pleading. "We want a chance to make it right. To be your family again." The word family stung. Eli glanced at Jamie, whose steady gaze reminded him of the family he'd found in Philadelphia, the late-night talks, the shared laughter, the quiet strength. He turned to Noah, who hadn't spoken since they sat down. "And you?" Eli asked. "Where were you when they sent me away?" Noah's face crumpled. "I was a coward," he said. "I wanted to stop them, but I was scared. I've regretted it every day since." The honesty in Noah's voice cracked something in Eli. He remembered their childhood, the way Noah had always been his protector, his mirror. But he also remembered the silence, the absence when he needed Noah most. "I needed you," Eli said, his voice breaking. "And you let me go." The room fell silent, the weight of their choices pressing down. Jamie spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "Eli's built a life without you. He's strong, talented, loved. If you want him back, you need to earn it." Margaret nodded, wiping her tears. "We know. We'll do whatever it takes." That night, Eli and Jamie stayed in a motel on the edge of town. Eli couldn't sleep, his mind a tangle of emotions. Jamie lay beside him, their fingers intertwined. "You don't owe them anything," Jamie said. "But if you want to try, I'll be here." Eli stared at the ceiling, thinking of his paintings, His life in Philadelphia. The boy he'd become despite his parents' rejection. He didn't know if he could forgive them. But Noah's words lingered. Maybe there was a way to rebuild. Not with his parents, but with his twin. The next morning, Eli met Noah at the park where they used to play as kids. The swings creaked in the breeze, and Noah looked nervous, his hands stuffed in his pockets like they were 17 again. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Noah said, "but I want to try. I want my brother back." Eli's throat tightened. He thought of the letters Noah had sent, the ones he'd read in secret, each one a plea for connection. "I missed you," Eli admitted. "But it's not that simple." "I know," Noah said. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." They talked for hours, the words tentative at first, then flowing like they used to. Noah told Eli about college, about the pressure to be the perfect son, about the guilt that never left. Eli shared stories of Philadelphia, of Jamie, of the art that had saved him. For the first time in years, they felt like brothers again. The park bench was cold under Eli's hands, but the conversation with Noah warmed something inside him. They laughed over old memories, stealing cookies from the bakery, sneaking out to watch meteor showers, but the heavier truths lingered, unspoken. Noah's apology was raw, and Eli felt the first cracks in the wall he'd built around his heart. Back at the motel, Jamie was waiting, sketching in a notebook he'd borrowed from Eli. "How'd it go?" he asked, his eyes searching Eli's face. "He's trying," Eli said, sitting beside him. "I don't know if I can trust it yet, but I want to." Jamie nodded, setting the notebook aside. "You don't have to decide now. You've got time." Time. It was a luxury Eli hadn't felt in years. In Philadelphia, every day had been about survival, paying rent, chasing dreams, proving he was more than his parents' rejection. Now, faced with Noah's regret and his parents' pleas, time felt like both a gift and a burden. The next day, Eli agreed to meet his parents again. The bakery was closed, its windows dark, a stark contrast to the bustling hub it had been in his childhood. Margaret had prepared lunch, a spread of sandwiches and lemonade that felt like an offering. David sat at the head of the table, his hands steady now, his eyes fixed on Eli. "We've been talking to Pastor John," Margaret said, her voice tentative. "He's different from the old one. He says God loves you as you are." Eli's fork paused midair. The words were ones he'd longed to hear as a teenager, but now they felt like too little, too late. "And you believe him?" he asked, his tone sharp. "After everything?" David spoke up, his voice softer than Eli remembered. "We were wrong, Eli. We let fear and bad teaching guide us. We're learning now, trying to understand." Eli glanced at Jamie, who gave a subtle nod, urging him to speak his truth. "You sent me to a place that tried to erase me," Eli said, his voice trembling with years of held-back pain. "You chose your beliefs over your son. Do you know what that did to me?" Margaret's face crumpled, and David reached for her hand. "We didn't know," she whispered. "We thought we were saving you." "Saving me?" Eli's voice rose. "You broke me. I had to rebuild myself from nothing." The silence was deafening. Noah, sitting across from Eli, looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't. Jamie's hand found Eli's under the table, a quiet anchor. Finally, David spoke. "We can't undo it, but we want to try. Eli, we want to know you, the real you." Eli didn't know if he could give them that chance. The pain was still there, a scar that ached in the quiet moments. But he saw something in their eyes, grief. Yes, but also a flicker of hope. He didn't trust it. Not yet. But he didn't want to close the door entirely. That evening, Eli and Jamie walked through Willow Creek, passing the high school, the church, the places that had once defined him. Jamie pointed to a mural on a brick wall, a vibrant splash of color in the drab town. "You could do better than that," he said, nudging Eli. Eli laughed, the sound lighter than he'd expected. "Maybe I will," he said. "Paint something that says, 'I'm here, and I'm enough.'" They stopped at the river, the same one where they'd thrown pebbles years ago in Philadelphia. Jamie took Eli's hand, his touch warm and steady. "You're enough," he said, "with or without them." Eli's heart swelled. He'd spent so long running from his past. But Jamie had shown him what it meant to be seen, to be loved for who he was. He leaned in, their lips meeting in a soft, tentative kiss the first time Eli had let himself cross that line. It felt like a promise, one he wasn't afraid to keep. Back in Philadelphia, Eli's life resumed its rhythm classes, painting, late nights with Jamie. But Noah's letters kept coming, each one a step toward rebuilding their bond. They talked on the phone, awkward at first, then easier, their twin connection slowly mending. Noah visited once, marveling at Eli's paintings, his small apartment, the life he'd carved out. Margaret and David sent letters, too, careful and earnest. They were attending a new church, one that welcomed everyone, and they joined a support group for parents of LGBTQ kids. Eli read their words with caution, but he didn't throw them away. He wasn't ready to forgive. Not fully, but he was starting to believe they might change. One day, Clara, the gallery owner, called with news. A bigger gallery in New York wanted to feature Eli's work. It was a chance to tell his story on a larger stage, to show the world the beauty born from his pain. He painted furiously, his canvases alive with color and emotion, each one a piece of his journey. Jamie was there through it all, his laughter and love a constant. Their relationship deepened, no longer just friendship but something stronger, built on trust and shared scars. Eli realized he'd found a home not in Willow Creek, but in the life he'd created, in the people who chose him. Eli's paintbrush moved with purpose, each stroke a defiance of the past. The New York Gallery show was 3 months away, and his apartment was a chaos of canvases, each one telling a piece of his story: rejection, resilience, love. Jamie, sprawled on the couch, watched him work, his presence a quiet reassurance. "You're gonna blow them away," Jamie said, tossing a grape into his mouth. "Those fancy art people won't know what hit him." Eli smiled, but his thoughts drifted to Willow Creek. Noah's calls had become weekly, their conversations longer, filled with cautious hope. His parents' letters arrived like clockwork, each one detailing their efforts to understand books they'd read, meetings they'd attended, apologies they repeated. Eli wasn't sure what to feel. Forgiveness seemed like a mountain too high to climb, but their persistence chipped away at his resolve. One evening, Noah called with news. "Mom's chemo is working," he said, his voice lighter than usual. "She's stronger. And Dad's got a new doctor. They're different. Eli, they talk about you all the time." Eli gripped the phone, his heart a tangle of hope and doubt. "What do they say?" "That they miss you. That they're proud of you. They saw your gallery ad online," Mom cried when she saw your name. The words hit harder than Eli expected. He'd spent years convincing himself their love was lost. But the thought of his mother crying over his success stirred something deep. He didn't tell Noah he'd cried, too. After hanging up, with Jamie holding him in the dark, the gallery show loomed closer, and Eli poured his soul into his work. One painting stood out, a boy standing at a crossroads. One path leading to a cold, gray house, the other to a vibrant city. It was his story, raw and unfiltered, and he titled it, Choosing Myself. Clara saw it and gasped. "This is it," she said. "This is the centerpiece." Jamie helped Eli prepare, framing paintings, practicing his artist statement. Their relationship had grown into something steady, a partnership built on late-night talks and shared dreams. Eli hadn't said, "I love you" yet, but the words hovered, waiting for the right moment. 2 weeks before the show, Noah called again. "They want to come," he said. "Mom and Dad. To New York. They want to see your work." Eli froze. The idea of his parents in his world, his real world, felt like an invasion. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted. "You don't have to say yes," Noah said. "But they're trying. Eli. Really trying." Eli discussed it with Jamie, who listened with his usual calm. "It's your call," Jamie said. "But if they come, they're on your turf. You're in control." The thought of control steadied Eli. He agreed. But with conditions, they could come to the show. But no expectations. No demands. Noah relayed the message, and Eli could hear the relief in his voice. The night of the gallery show was electric. The New York space was sleek, with white walls and soft lighting that made Eli's paintings glow. He wore a blazer Jamie had picked out, his nerves buzzing as strangers milled around, murmuring about his work. Jamie stayed close, his hand brushing Eli's when the crowd felt overwhelming. Noah arrived first, his eyes wide as he took in the gallery. He hugged Eli. A real hug this time. No hesitation. "This is incredible," he said, staring at Choosing Myself. "This is you." Eli's throat tightened. "Thanks for being here," he said, and meant it. Then he saw the Margaret and David, standing uncertainly at the entrance. They looked out of place, older and smaller than he remembered, their eyes scanning the room until they found him. Margaret's hand went to her mouth, and David's shoulders sagged, as if the weight of seeing Eli lifted something heavy. They approached slowly, like they were afraid he'd run. "Eli," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "Your paintings, they're beautiful." David nodded, his eyes wet. "We're so proud of you." Eli didn't know what to say. The anger was still there, but it was quieter now, softened by their presence, by the effort they'd made. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady but distant. "I'm glad you came." They didn't push, didn't ask for more than he could give. They wandered the gallery, lingering at each painting, their faces a mix of awe and sorrow. Eli watched them, torn between the boy who'd longed for their love and the man who'd learned to live without it. Jamie leaned in, whispering, "You okay?" Eli nodded, squeezing his hand. "Yeah, I think I am." The show was a success, with several paintings sold and critics praising Eli's raw emotional depth. But the real victory was quieter, standing in a room full of his truth, surrounded by the people who mattered: Jamie, Noah, and, tentatively, his parents. He didn't know what came next, but for the first time, he felt like he could face it. The gallery lights dimmed as the crowd thinned. leaving Eli with a quiet pride that felt new. Fragile. His paintings had spoken for him, telling a story of pain and triumph that even his parents couldn't ignore. Margaret and David lingered by choosing myself, their whispers too soft to hear, but their faces said enough regret. Love. A longing to bridge the gap. Noah pulled Eli aside, his eyes bright. I've never been prouder to be your brother, he said. I'm sorry it took me so long to show it. Eli's chest ached. He wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt. But Noah's sincerity was disarming. You're here now? Eli said. That's what matters. They hugged. Longer this time. And Eli felt a piece of his childhood slot back into place. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Jamie watched from across the room, his smile soft. And Eli knew he'd have to tell him soon those 3 words that had been growing louder in his heart. Margaret approached, hesitant, her hands clasped tightly. Can we talk? She asked. Just for a minute. Eli glanced at Jamie, who nodded. They stepped outside, the New York night cool against Eli's skin. Margaret's breath hitched as she spoke. I know we don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, but I need you to know we're trying. We're learning. We want to be part of your life, if you'll let us. David stood beside her, his silence heavy but his eyes pleading. Eli searched their faces, looking for the parents who'd sent him away. He saw them, but he also saw something new: humility, vulnerability, a willingness to change. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Eli said, his voice steady. But I'm willing to try. Slowly. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. That's more than we deserve, she said. David reached out, then stopped, as if afraid to cross a line. Eli extended his hand instead, and David took it, his grip trembling but firm. Back inside, Jamie was waiting, his presence a balm to Eli's raw emotions. They left the gallery together, Noah promising to visit Philadelphia soon. Margaret and David returned to Willow Creek, but their letters continued, each one a small step toward healing. Eli's life in Philadelphia bloomed. His art career gained traction, with galleries in Boston and Chicago reaching out. He and Jamie moved into a bigger apartment, one with a skylight for painting and a corner for Jamie's music. Their relationship deepened, marked by quiet moments cooking dinner, dancing to old records, kissing under the stars. One night, as they lay in bed, Eli turned to Jamie. I love you, he said, the words spilling out like a long-held breath. Jamie's grin was brighter than the city lights. Took you long enough, he teased, pulling Eli close. I love you, too. Noah visited often, their bond growing stronger with each trip. He brought stories of Willow Creek, of their parents' continued efforts to change. Margaret volunteered at a local LGBTQ youth center, and David had started speaking out at church, challenging old prejudices. Eli listened, cautious but hopeful, and began to reply to their letters, his words tentative but honest. The next summer, Eli returned to Willow Creek for the first time since the gallery show. The town felt different, smaller, less suffocating. He and Jamie walked hand in hand, ignoring the stares from old neighbors. Noah met them at the bakery, now under new management, but still smelling of cinnamon. Margaret and David were there, nervous but warm, offering coffee and stories of their progress. They spent the day together, the conversation careful but real. Eli saw glimpses of the parents he'd loved as a child, mixed with the people they were becoming. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a bridge, one they were all building together. Back in Philadelphia, Eli started a new painting, A Family at a Table. Not perfect, but trying, with a city skyline in the background. It was his most hopeful work yet, a testament to the life he'd chosen and the love he'd found. Jamie hung it above their couch, calling it ours. Eli's heart was still scarred, but the wounds were healing. He'd learned that family wasn't just blood, it was the people who stayed, who fought for you, who loved you as you were. Jamie was his family. Noah was his family. And maybe, one day, his parents could be, too. Eli's paintbrush paused above the canvas, the colors blending into a sunrise hopeful, unfinished. His life had become a delicate balance, art shows, Jamie's laughter, Noah's visits, and the slow, tentative steps toward rebuilding with his parents. Forgiveness wasn't a switch he could flip, but each letter from Willow Creek, each call from Noah, softened the edges of his pain. Jamie had become his rock, his home. Their apartment was a sanctuary of shared dreams, filled with Eli's paintings and Jamie's guitar melodies. One evening, as they sat on the fire escape, Jamie strummed a soft tune, his voice low. "You ever think about the future?" he asked. "All the time," Eli said, leaning against him. "You. Me. Maybe a dog. More art. More music." Jamie grinned. "Sounds like a plan." Their love was steady, unhurried, built on the kind of trust Eli hadn't known was possible. He thought of the boy at the bus station, alone and scared, and marveled at how far he'd come. Jamie had been there through it all, never pushing, always present. Eli knew he'd found something rare, something worth fighting for. Noah's visits grew more frequent, each one a chance to reclaim their twin bond. They'd walk the Schuylkill River, talking about everything and nothing: soccer, art, the past. Noah shared stories of their parents' changes, Margaret's work at the youth center, David's quiet advocacy at church. "They're not perfect," Noah said once, tossing a pebble into the water. "But they're trying. For you." Eli nodded, his heart caught between hope and caution. He'd started replying to his parents' letters, short notes at first, then longer ones, sharing bits of his life, his art, his friends, Jamie. Their responses were careful, filled with questions about his work, his happiness. It wasn't the family he'd lost, but it was something new, something possible. One day, a package arrived from Willow Creek. Inside was a sketchbook, one Eli had left behind in the attic. Tucked between its pages was a note from Margaret. "We kept this for you. Your talent was always a gift. We're sorry we didn't see it sooner." Eli held the book, his teenage drawings a reminder of who he'd been. And cry not from pain, but from the possibility of healing. The next spring, Eli was invited to speak at a youth center in Philadelphia, sharing his story with kids like him, teens cast out for who they were. He stood before them, his voice steady, and told them about the bus station, the camp, the years of rebuilding. He told them about Jamie, about art, about choosing yourself. The kids listened, some with tears in their eyes, and Eli felt a purpose he hadn't known he needed. Afterward, a girl approached him, her voice small. "Do you think my parents will ever change?" Eli thought of Margaret and David, of their slow, imperfect journey. "Maybe," he said, "but you don't need their love to be whole. You're enough, just as you are." The words echoed back to him, a truth he'd fought to believe. He realized then that his story wasn't just his, it was a lifeline for others. A reminder that survival was possible, that love could be found in the ashes of rejection. That summer, Eli and Jamie planned a trip to Willow Creek. Not just to visit, but to stay for a week. Noah was thrilled, offering to set up a guest room in his apartment. Margaret and David insisted on hosting a dinner, promising to keep it simple. No pressure. Eli agreed, his heart lighter than he'd expected. The drive to Willow Creek was different this time. Jamie sang along to the radio, and Eli laughed, the tension of past trips replaced by a quiet hope. When they arrived, Noah was waiting, his grin wide. The town hadn't changed much, but Eli felt like a visitor in a place that no longer owned him. Dinner at the Harper house was awkward but warm. Margaret had made Eli's favorite lasagna and David shared stories of his new hobby, woodworking. They asked about Jamie's music, about Eli's next show, their interest genuine. Eli watched them, searching for the parents who'd sent him away, but found instead two people trying to make amends. After dinner, Eli and his parents sat in the backyard, the stars bright above. "We're not asking you to forget," David said, his voice low, "but we hope you'll let us be part of your life." Eli looked at them, then at Jamie, who was laughing with Noah by the fire pit. "I'm trying," he said. "It's not easy, but I'm trying." Margaret reached for his hand, and this time, Eli didn't pull away. It wasn't forgiveness. Not fully, but it was a step. And for now, that was enough. The Willow Creek air was warm, the fire pit casting a soft glow over the backyard. Eli sat between his parents, the silence between them heavy but not suffocating. Jamie's laughter with Noah drifted over, a reminder of the life Eli had built, the love he'd found. This moment imperfect, tentative, was a bridge between his past and present, one he hadn't expected to cross. Margaret spoke first, her voice soft. "I look at you now, Eli, and I see how strong you are. We didn't give you that. You found it yourself." Eli's throat tightened. He wanted to say it wasn't true, that their rejection had nearly broken him. But he saw the truth in her eyes: regret. Yes, but also pride. David nodded, his hands clasped. "We failed you," he said. "But we're here now, if you'll have us." Eli looked at the stars, the same ones he and Noah had watched as kids. He thought of the bus station, the camp, the years of rebuilding. He thought of Jamie, whose love had shown him what acceptance felt like. He thought of Noah, who'd found his way back to being a brother. And he thought of himself, the boy who'd survived, the man who'd thrived. "I don't know if I can forgive you completely," Eli said, his voice steady. "But I want to try. I want us to know each other again." Margaret's eyes glistened, and David reached out, his hand resting briefly on Eli's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it carried years of unspoken apologies. They didn't push for more, and Eli was grateful. Healing, he realized, wasn't a destination but a journey, one they were all on together. The week in Willow Creek passed quickly. Eli and Jamie explored the town, revisiting old haunts: the park, the river, the bakery. Noah joined them, their laughter echoing like it had in their childhood. Margaret and David were present but careful, giving Eli space while showing their effort small gifts, like a new sketchbook or invitations to church events that welcomed everyone. On the last day, Eli painted a mural on the youth center's wall, a gift to the town that had once rejected him. It was a vibrant scene: two boys, hand in hand, under a sky bursting with color. The kids at the center helped, their laughter filling the air. And Eli felt a purpose deeper than art. This was his way of saying, I was here, and I'm enough. Margaret and David came to see the mural. Their faces awed. You're changing this place, Margaret said, her voice thick. You're making it better. Eli met her eyes, seeing the mother he'd loved, the one he might love again. I'm trying, he said, and she smiled. A real smile, one that reached her eyes. Back in Philadelphia, Eli's life felt fuller. His art career soared, with galleries clamoring for his work. He and Jamie adopted a dog, a scruffy mutt they named Canvas, who slept at the foot of their bed. Noah visited often, sometimes with Margaret and David, who were learning to navigate Eli's world. They met Clara, saw his shows, listened to Jamie's music. Each visit was a step, each conversation a stitch in the fabric of their new family. One evening, as Eli and Jamie sat on their fire escape, the city alive below, Eli pulled out his old sketchbook from Willow Creek. He flipped through the pages, his teenage dreams preserved in pencil and ink. On the last page, he drew something new, a family. Not perfect but trying, under a sky that promised hope. You okay? Jamie asked, his arm around Eli's shoulders. Yeah, Eli said, leaning into him. I'm more than okay. He realized then that his story wasn't about forgiveness. Allenite was about choosing who he wanted to be, about building a life where love wasn't conditional. He'd found that with Jamie, with Noah, with the community he'd created. His parents were part of it now, not because they deserved it, but because Eli chose to let them try. The stars above Philadelphia glittered, and Eli felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. He was home not in a place, but in the people who loved him, in the art that spoke his truth, in the strength he'd forged from pain. He was enough, and that was everything.